Welcome, Graham. Welcome to our conversation on soul. I've invited you here today out of a curiosity to talk about some of the strands of the work that you're interested in and open up a conversation about soul and its many different expressions. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself and share anything that you'd like to about you and your work, what you're passionate about.
Yeah, so I'm Graham. I'm from the UK. I'm originally from Cambridgeshire, so south of England, the flatlands, and I've been doing this for about 11 years, I would say, roughly 11 years, and coming from a place of, I would say, like existential crisis, like a kind of crisis of identity, love, everything. I had reached a point, I think, where it was uh, too much for me to push down or suppress or avoid or be above. So I kind of had a kind of breakdown, I suppose, in real time
Mm,
over a period of, yeah, maybe even if I look back on it, about 3 or 4 years. Like just I really fought and stretched it out. And then I think when I was 34, I just kind of gave in and said, okay, like there's got to be much more to life than this. So I felt, I started to feel or hear a calling, and
mm,
I had the idea that I had never heard a calling before in my life, and that I didn't know what any of this meant. And then as I started to explore and widen my experience, I realized actually that often had had a very deep connection to a more spiritual life. I just didn't identify it that way. So there were all these gifts and qualities which to me were as natural as drinking water. As I started to be in more environments where
mm,
people had the capacity to reflect that back to me, I realized that there was something innately unique and special, yet somehow really mirrored in my experiences of being with other people, which is something that I had up until that point largely avoided.
mhm,
So I'd
mm,
say that's perhaps a good way to start. And then the the way in which I did that was really kamikaze. Like I was, because I didn't really understand like the notion of support, I threw myself into reckless endeavors, so a lot of drinking
mhm,
ayahuasca with practitioners who are very well-meaning and sweet and kind, but didn't really know how to hold that kind of space or
mhm,
work with that kind of medicine. Sometimes it would work, and quite often it wouldn't. So I went through a gradual process of re-traumatization, which I don't want to be reckless. I would say that there was some utility to it,
mm,
and that I was able to see the utility of that.
mm,
Meant that there was a feeling that I could find something that would support me to work through the material, which was very much ayahuasca was like the kind of key to Pandora's box. And then I
mm,
opened that. I was like, okay. I remember being on a car journey with a friend going to, I think, our third or fourth ayahuasca ceremony, and just telling him like about my life. I'd never done that before. I'd never shared
mm,
anything really with anyone.
mm,
And to see like the color like leaving his face, like also, okay, what's happened to me is not, it's not normal, it's not usual. And yeah, it was a process of I think revealing more and more,
mm.
and making sense of my experiences, and trying to find places where I could make sense of my experiences as well, and find the support that I think deeper down I really craved.
Mm. Oh, that's beautiful. And what do you do now? I know you kind of carry a few hats, so I'd love to hear about what you do.
Yeah, I have a reasonably diverse range of things that I'm doing these days, but it's all fairly harmonious in a strange way, I suppose. So there's the men's work. We do soul initiation for men, a level of soul initiation for men with Emergence Brotherhood, and that's with my dear friend and brother Robbie Griffin.
Mm,
And also I'm a psychedelic guide. I hesitate to use the word therapist. Aspects of it are certainly therapeutic, but it's more of a guide. And also, I offer one-to-one support too. So online coaching from where I am in Istanbul, supporting various different people who are going through various different kind of crisis slash initiation processes, whether it's approaching death, letting go of the identity of being the one who has to fight to be good enough, people pleasers, and that's kind of my kind of character structure as well, I suppose, as being someone who's always looking to prove themselves or to
Mhm.
validate. So I've had a real wrestling match with that part of myself, and I'm pleased to say that for the most part it's self-sourced now. But there was also a kind of process of this soul recognition piece, which I alluded to earlier, which is
Mhm.
a kind of deeper seeing or a deeper recognition that I find a guiding principle, like not
Mm.
just to give, but to receive as well.
Yeah, that's totally fundamental, I think, to the process of soul work is to be able to be seen through the gaze of another in a soulful lens and to be able to actually see yourself because I talked about this with another person on this podcast and really so many of us grow up not actually having the external reflection of the true nature that lives inside. We're often told that we're beautiful or we're good at school or we're naughty
Mm,
or whatever it may be, but actually the great gifts that so many of us carry, um, they don't really get so reflected in our society or plucked out at school. And so it's really beautiful to actually come into an environment whenever that time comes and realize, oh, like I'm not alone. There's also people out here who think and feel like me, but also I can be seen through a loving gaze. I definitely have found that incredibly helpful through the
mm.
last kind of 6 or so years of my awakening is coming into contact with people who consistently mirror or reflect back to me the things that I didn't really ever pride myself on, but now I do.
Yeah, yeah, I
Mm.
can think of quite a few different things. It was like really radical for me to be in spaces where I could be honest as well, because
Mm,
I would often see things like that I would never tell people. Like I could see people's gifts. That was always the big thing, but I could always see the way that people got in their own way as
mm,
well, like cognitively, physically, emotionally. I could see all of that, and I just it was so radical for me to be in a space where that wasn't only acceptable, but it was also encouraged that I would
mm,
bring myself forward and be able to turn that back on myself too, which to reveal myself in front of a room full of people about
mm,
something that I had carried for like 20 years or 30 years that I didn't like about myself or I thought was a problem. And then to see people share with me that that was incredibly potent or powerful, it moved them. I remember the
mm,
first time I did Ista, I came in
mm,
the middle. I don't know what possessed me. It was we were introducing ourselves, and I could feel like my legs shaking, and I was like, "Whoa, what's going on?" And I just there's just this it streamed out of me, and I remember I was looking at the floor as I was sharing, and just trembling, and then I kind of looked up, like how a little boy would look up after he'd been
mm,
naughty or something, or just trying to check to see whether people are with me. They weren't only with me, but they were weeping as well. And
mm,
I was like, did I do something wrong? And then I just stayed with it and was like, oh, they've moved by me. Like I've been moved by something and they've been moved by me. It was incredible, like to see
mm,
it have an impact on people, which is something that I had really rejected. I thought I was boring.
mm.
I was really settled on that. Like I would I would talk to people for like 20 seconds and then I would leave. Yeah. That was what I was like. I wouldn't stay in contact with people.
Mm,
So it was to have like 3 to 5 minutes to share uninterrupted was just, and I'm encouraged to take that. I don't have to, but I'm encouraged to take that time. Yeah.
Wow, so beautiful. Maybe you never thought that you would end up being a facilitator and leading things and guiding people through their own process.
No, never, not, well, certainly not at that point. I
Mm,
started to come to realize that there was something about the way that I communicated that was unusual or interesting, and would start to get that reflected back to me. And then I started to get this. I guess I'd always actually I kept a lot of secrets when I was little. So
mm,
I think on a kind of smaller level, like a tenser, more compact kind of personal level, I'd often been somebody that people felt that they could say things to or tell their secrets to. I guess it was just one of those things. But I realized that the more honest I was, the more real I was, the more people trusted me as well. So it started to be that people again wanted to tell me about their experiences, and not just that, but they wanted some level of support, and I didn't exactly know how to give that in a kind of structured or supportive way that would help them to process it. And I think that was because I hadn't really done my own processing yet at that particular
mm,
point in time. So that it felt like while I was going on this journey of personal transformation, personal development, like I was also, seeking out education and guidance as well at the same time, because there was just so much that I needed someone
mm,
to who was ahead of me to kind of show me the
mm,
way a little bit,
mm.
because it was a bit overwhelming. It was like, okay, I I don't really know how to support you in this particular moment in time with anything other than just the quality of my presence, which is still my one of my kind of foundations, but at the same time, like I really had no idea what I was doing.
And what do you love about your work now? What like lights you up the most about your work with people?
Hmm. I think it's actually the moment that mirrors my experience in the sharing circle. It's the moment where soul recognizes soul. So the
Mm,
sense of like the deeper self comes into contact with the deeper self of the other, and with an individual, I would say. So if they come in the sharing circle, if we're on a one-to-one call, if we're in a psychedelic ceremony, just this moment of kind of a 180 where the person comes into contact with their sense of the eternal. I think that's the best way to describe it. And then to be with them, like in their
mm,
experience of that, in my experience of that.
mm,
I, there's a lovely piece that the Sufis say of I was a hidden treasure, so I created creation to be known.
mm,
And it has this kind of sense of like the personal and the divine, I think. And this is a feeling or a felt sense that that I guess I treasure probably more than any other, to be with somebody in that moment where they can feel and see and sense and know their own divinity.
mm. Yeah, I really resonate with that. There's such an exquisite intimacy that comes in those moments where the veil just kind of falls away a little bit, and it's just this moment of real touch of purity, and anything external just falls away. And I also love those moments when I feel somebody get more free, like some part realizes it's not needed anymore and kind of like drifts off or melts away in the moment. And it's just so exquisite to be witness to that process. And I know that inside myself because it's often so quiet and so still and so
Mm,
tender, these kind of moments of revelation, and having like a gaze on somebody else in that. And often nothing even needs to be said, but it's just so beautiful.
mm.
And
Yeah, I love the way you describe it. It's I get the sense of that in this moment too.
Mm.
It's so moving.
Yeah.
It's just everything kind of that moves out of the way somehow. And then I
Mm.
feel that yeah, that really deep connection and the it's not that that I've moved everything out of the way either. It's in a sense actually I'm including everything too. It's everything that I am has kind of like a seat at the table, but at the
Mm.
same time I'm consolidated too.
Mm.
And I'm much more than the sum of my parts. Like when I'm
Mm.
with someone in that experience and
Mm.
to look at somebody and to be like astounded by how
Mm.
beautiful they are or like how magical they are or how in that moment they feel kind of I don't know like everything. I think the way you described it kind of there's a all the kind of external noise kind of stops and I'm just fully with someone to as much as at least I know how to be in
Mm.
this particular stage.
Mm. Yeah, it's so special. Oh, there's a few kind of avenues I'm feeling to go down, but maybe we could start with um, what what trauma healing can support us with beyond the healing of traumas when it comes to working with the soul and however you understand the soul to be. Because what I see a lot of the trauma work that can support soul work, and there's ways that those two are different and ways in which they're all the same thing. Um, is I think allowing ourselves, from my experience, to become more free, to take a step away from like a reactive experience of patterning or something that's happened that I believe I'm X, Y, or Z and therefore unworthy and all of that stuff, that so many of us carry around that programs and runs our lives in the background. Once there's more space from that and some of those traumas can be either worked with and brought into love or melted away, as I said, I feel like the closer we can come to our true self and deep self. But there's also something I experience a lot also, which is like the times of greatest crisis and challenge and pain is often actually when I feel closest to my soul and and my creativity. So I don't think any of this is linear or one way or you've got to do X, Y, Z to get to your soul. But I'm just interested in your views on, working with trauma and how that can expand someone's perception of self, perhaps.
Yeah, I suppose like if I looked at it as a picture when I was 35, I was here and then I kind of turned around and I had a little look and I was like, holy shit. There's like so many doors and
Mm,
gateways and everything and like how am I going to move all of that out of the way and like what even is my true self? What even is my soul? What does that mean? Like, and will I ever feel that? And what does that feel like? Because
mm,
I really didn't know. And then it was kind of the way I look at it is like it's a kind of not linear necessarily, but a step-by-step process of like pulling the screens back and then moving through the next
mm,
piece. And I never really saw trauma work as being separate from transformational work either.
mm,
So I
mm,
know some people make distinctions, and I think as well there is occasionally a message. I don't know whether I interpret it correctly, but almost as though the position of the therapist or the one who's supporting is a bit of a tenuous position. And it's not as though I completely disagree with that either. I've definitely had therapeutic experiences where the therapists has centralized themselves in the experience too much, or that
mm,
feels like there develops a dependency or something along those lines. The way I work now, especially in the way that I receive support, is it's all about just being curious and being with that as a resource. So often what I'm going through these days is a kind of sense of, okay, like this thing happens I'm curious about. whether it's a challenge I face in my life, or can even be something that I really, really cherish and value, and can I understand more deeply why that is? So it's not just a process of descending and letting go, but also kind of transcending and including too.
Mm,
And I feel like these two trajectories, if one is not present, then perhaps the treasure doesn't get mined quite so deeply or in a way that's sustainable. Um, and I felt like I feel like trauma work is kind of a essential as well. So I don't really feel the division. I think every transformational experience I had felt like I was on the threshold of the limitations of what my trauma had created in my system, and then somehow was the additional capacity or the resource that became available when I was in that really specific place
mm,
of the thing that had happened to me or the belief that I had about myself. And then came the release or the integration perhaps of
mm,
whatever that experience or memory was.
mm,
So it's often felt like little and big steps on
mm,
the way. And for me, my kind of core experience that had really shaped my life was a drowning experience when I was a little boy. And whenever I would come into contact with a difficult or challenging experience, whether it was um, abuse of all different kinds and to different degrees of severity, was a sense that I was going to die and a feeling that I couldn't breathe.
mm,
And it was a kind of repetition of that experience. And I spent probably, Christ, like maybe 7 or 8 years developing the ability and the capacity to consciously choose to go into that experience, to build the picture, to build the capacity, to build the resilience, to develop the courage actually, and also the thing I think that's probably the hardest thing to describe is the process of surrendering to that experience because I in terms of my body, it felt like I literally had to surrender to death.
mm,
So I somehow needed to walk towards it and I needed to recreate the feeling. And that's something that I had tried in transformational containers and couldn't really go there.
mm,
It didn't feel like I had the skill or the surrender. And sometimes it didn't feel like I necessarily had the support in the
mm,
place to be able to do that because I actually did do it for the first time, it took me about 6 or 7 hours like
mm,
to go to that place. And even then I needed lots of support too. I think I needed two therapists at one point, and then eventually it was one to really go into that and to come into contact, I think, with a something like a little bit beyond survival. So, of course, like I survived the experience, like cognitively, I understand that. That's clear. And that survival process of that experience had taken a lot from me. It had
mm,
taken a lot of energy. In my day-to-day life, I was very low energy. I was very compressed. I was very heavy. Even though I was probably only like 10 and a half stone, I was like so heavy.
mm,
And then I came into contact with beyond the fear and the struggle and I'm gonna die, help, was this sense actually of life.
mm,
All of a sudden, I started to feel like, fuck, I don't just want to survive. Like I really want to be here and I really want to
mm,
live.
mm,
Like I'll do anything to live. I could just feel it like this. I want this. Like I really want this. I'll do anything. I just felt like this whew, huge surge of electricity in my body. And I remember the therapist just touched very gently. She was stroking the palm of my hand, and every touch felt like an orgasm. It was like my whole body was just singing, and I just felt so clear. And then with that clarity came this kind of wave after wave of deep emotion. And I realized that I can choose to express and be in this deep emotion. It's that everything is like an invitation coming towards me. And I remember for like hours I was just crying and laughing, crying and laughing, crying and laughing. And I just this barrier that I often perceived between my body and other people, it really melted. And I was just like, wow, I really want to be held. I really want to hold people. And I've just like I've spent so much of my life like avoiding this desire to be close to people. It just gave me so much. It was all of a
Mm.
sudden what was being asked of me in the transformational containers. I all of a sudden I had the resource to be able to kind of crack or open in the way that so often people were asking me to, like, Graham, get out of your own way, Graham, show yourself, whatever it was, which I perceived as criticisms, which didn't really help me. But again, that was just a repetition of my childhood as well. It's just like,
Mm.
I got criticized a lot, and people didn't really understand me. So they didn't know how to support me because, I was quite an unusual child.
Mm.
Mm.
Thank you for sharing all of that. Yeah.
Mm.
It leads me on to the topic of need and actually asking for support. And so I'd love to just touch on this a little bit about,
Mm.
yeah, what's your kind of passion inside of supporting people to find that?
Yeah, there's a kind of because my injury is quite early, there's a sense of like ascending with very little ground. So
Mm.
much of my early life was spent in my imagination, which was quite complex and interesting, and I really enjoyed being there. And then like video games and all kinds of escapist kind of tendencies, a kind of spiritual aspect to it, and also an intellectual one too. So often wishing to engage on those kinds of levels. And then people would ask me questions like, "Or what do you want?" or "What do you need?" And those kind of situations, I would be really either like bashful or just kind of clueless. Like I actually haven't no idea. And then I
Mm.
made that something positive about me. Like I decided that not having needs is makes me even perhaps better than other people. So there I am. I'm like above having needs. I'm above having emotions, but I'm not really here. Like I look like a human. I kind of like a facsimile of a human, but I'm not really in my body. I don't have a voice. I don't really I haven't really engaged with how it feels to be a human, and a lot of the qualities that people were mirroring back to me in those days were that they were more performative. So I came to realize later that there was some truth in them, but at the time I just felt like a fraud.
Mm.
I felt like an imposter. People would tell me or reflect back to me who I was, and I just felt like I didn't deserve to be here. So that was my a prevailing sense. And then when I started to come into contact with needs, I remember it was mainly through being supported in a psychedelic therapy training to offer that kind of work. And often my experiences were quite cognitive or quite in the imagination. So they were kind of approximations of the material, but sort of disconnected from the real experience. So they would be a kind of lots of metaphor or lots of imagery, but not a lot of emotion. And I would see other people going through like deep emotional experiences, and I'd be like, well, why can't I do that? Like,
Mm.
why? I really want to. I see the impact and the power it's having and giving them too. And then I remember kind of having that reflected back to me, oh, you're not revealing much emotion, you're not showing much of yourself. Like what's going on there? And
Where are you?
yeah, exactly. Like, where are you? Are you even in the room? Um, and it was really, I didn't see having connection to my body as a fundamental need. I understood it conceptually. I felt pleasure, for example, so I could understand that there were benefits and utilities to being in the body, but it was also quite a frightening place for me to be as well. And the relationship between my mind and my body was quite torturous. You know, it
Mm,
was my mind was not happy about being in my body in particular. There was a lot of pain there,
mm,
particularly in the belly and in the heart as well. So it had become a kind of hostile ground, and more hostile for having abandoned it for so
mm,
many years too. And then when the needs came, it was more about recognizing something that I had felt all my life, but had chosen not to really feel it fully, and that was rejection. And it came in a moment where another person in the group was having a really deep process, and the therapist was with me, and she said, "Hey, Graham, I'm just going to leave to go and be with person X. Will you be okay?" And I thought, "Yeah, yeah, I'll be okay." And as she left, I could just feel it, like, "Don't go,
mm,
like, please don't go." And I couldn't say it. Like, it was like stuck in my throat, and I hadn't felt like that level of like feeling helpless. I just felt super helpless for having a need. And then when she came back, I was probably about half an hour later, and by the time she came back, I was cooked. I was just I was just felt this that transference on her, like of my mother. And it's like I really need you. Like, please don't leave me. Like, please don't go. And then please don't go became a kind of cry and then a scream and then just took me like deep down into the water and where I couldn't breathe. And yeah, the next thing I
mm,
know, and that's when I have the electricity and like, okay, there's something really important here about acknowledging my needs and not being above needs, because
mm,
if I don't have my needs and I'm not connected to reality, I'm not connected to what's true, I'm not connected to how I actually feel. And it's why I couldn't make decisions or choose things because I didn't know how I felt because I wasn't feeling. I didn't know how to do that, not
mm,
consistently.
mm.
Mm,
Yeah, uh, I'm being reminded of a medicine ceremony that I did once where I was like weeping for my mum because I thought I was dying, and
mm,
the practitioner left. She said, "I'm going to go and see someone else," and I just felt so abandoned. I was like lying there, like I'm going to die alone. My mum's not even here. So potent to see these parts of our psyche and yeah, underneath the kind of facade or the day to day, like the absolute terror that comes with feeling abandoned or rejection. And yeah,
mm,
some really painful places that can be touched along the way. And I think, even when there's been lots of healing done, obviously we're never fully healed, we never really get anywhere. But I think, for me, often like coming into deep contact with such deep love
mm,
shows that actually more comes up because it's like the terror of losing that and all the other kind of levels and ways that actually like what's hidden in the deep recesses of our being only
mm,
really pops its head up when there is a safe enough space and when there is enough love and there's enough stability and grounding. And I kind of trust the alchemy of it all so perfectly, like that practitioner, maybe she's super intuitive and was tuned in and knew exactly what was going to happen, or maybe it's just divine timing that that was the moment that your body was ready and you had enough capacity to actually go through that experience in a way that beforehand you haven't. And I think that there's something very clever about what our body and our psyche reveals to us at the perfect time, and it might feel like a massive edge, like, oh my god, this is a crisis, this is a new edge, but actually I think it's because we're actually ready. That's why we haven't met
mm.
that yet.
Mm,
Mm,
yeah, I have a similar kind of feeling to that as well. There was I think there's a stage I think that we all hopefully find is where there's enough curiosity that whatever happens, we can somehow make that more useful to the healing process
Mm,
or the process of transforming however you want to look at it. And I think with her, it's like, okay, like I have a reaction to something. This is meaningful. This is really important. Like, I can't just turn my back on my experience, which is what I'd been doing. So
mm,
I really went for it, and I think that's actually really going for it is something I really learned in transformational spaces as well.
mm,
Was the kind of will and determination were not necessarily things that I had an abundance of. Again, because I'm not really connected to my body. So I don't know, I didn't really know what will felt like, except in kind of flashes or moments. And the same with determination. Like I had always been giving up. That was my life. Like it was
mm,
just a series of giving up, which
mm,
is obviously the original experience too of the drowning. Like I gave up at some point, and I had to relive that,
mm,
and that's the thing that I couldn't complete in the original experience.
mm,
So there's always like a kind of really valuable life lesson now. Like, I'm much more tenacious. Like I really get my teeth into things, and people would argue that I was that way before, but I think as well it was more of a performance of being tenacious. There was some truth in it, but it wasn't like fully embodied. And then when it was, all of a sudden, like all these qualities and properties, but had become available to me.
mm,
And I remember people used to tell me that I was kind, and I actually didn't really relate to it that much. It felt a little bit performative. It was the same with being empathetic. It was more for me like a kind of cognitive understanding based on experience or kind of little micro changes that I was perceiving, but it wasn't really like a strong felt sense. And then all of a sudden, like compassion, kindness, sweetness, joy, these were all kind of not, they were just there. They were just like, like it's all somehow available now.
mm,
And the reason why I didn't have access to these things was because I hadn't worked through my life's situation enough
mm,
to really kind of lift off of those and say, okay, like now I can choose these things. And it's not always easy, Olivia. It's still a process and a practice. And
mm,
sometimes I don't have access to these things, and
mm,
more often than not I do. And
mm,
it's not like, hey, I need to grieve and I'm like, well, I'll just take a pinch of joy with that.
mm,
It just plays out the way it plays out, and I trust it.
mm.
Mm.
Yeah, Gabor Mate speaks very beautifully about I can't remember the exact wording, but basically, there's this kind of common perception that the human nature is like inevitably survival and law of the jungle. But actually, the more kind of negative projection on human nature that they're all kind of like, ready to kill someone for the next loaf of bread if we have to, is often rooted in the fact that so many of us are heavily traumatized and stepped far away from exactly the things you just mentioned, and coming into contact with our own hearts and our life force and our body and our sense of joy and sense of purpose and fulfillment and connection actually reveals, like, in my opinion, the tenacity of the human spirit and the depth of love that's possible between people. And anybody connected to a sense of soul or love in some way is not just going to go and push the old granny off the bus because you want to get on next, or there's something I think so deeply good about human nature, but what sits on
Mm,
top is just like the calcification of trauma and pain and having to survive, and just how challenging some people's lives actually are. And then no wonder the claws can come out and it can seem like human nature is all about survival. Mm,
mm. Yeah, I agree with you, and also I really had to go through some interesting places and pockets of the psyche to around the kind of energy of the person who would push the granny out of the seat or off the bus to what a lot
I've
worse, a
never
lot
actually
worse
seen
than
anyone
that.
do that.
No. I actually I was very much the person on the bus who no one would sit next to, and I would always have this question, like it was always a sort of dilemma, like why won't people sit next to me on the bus? And it was just because I was so my energetic field
Mm,
was pushing like everyone
wow.
way.
Mm,
Yeah. And I realized like when I started to play with that, all of a sudden like the grannies would sit next to me on the bus, and it's like
yeah,
I could start to
it's
experiment with that a
beautiful.
little bit.
It's like the archetypal loner, when you see
Mm,
um photos of, like the big gun shootings in America, and there's always a similar story of like this archetypal loner that's been cast out of school and never had any friends and probably abused by their parents, and so they spend all the time in their bedroom. And but the force field, as you say, of these people is like it's kind of a chicken and egg. That
mm,
obviously these things have happened at such a young age to create this repellent, like don't come near me, um, aura. But you're right, as I like walk around the city or whatever, like there's definitely people where I'm like swerving away from certain people because you can feel it.
mm. Yeah, I sort of made a little bit of a unconscious, I think, originally practice of I would always swerve towards those people. It
Mm,
was always a sense of I would be the person at the party who would be kind of hanging out with the people who no one else really wanted to talk to. I
mm,
just found them always fascinating.
mm,
It wasn't really even that people didn't want to talk to them. It's just they had such a strong idea that
mm,
nobody wanted to communicate with them, that they had
mm,
become the person who
yeah.
nobody wanted to communicate with. So, and I would find that with the men's work too, is we kind of do a process of somebody asks a question that's relevant to them and their life, and then everyone steps in to whatever degree that's the answer is true for them. And it would always be the same people that
Mm,
I would be going in with. So it was
mm,
interesting for me on that basis was that I was quite often on the with the people at the back. So the people who are slower
mm,
or more hesitant to kind of come into the center, whatever that means, whether it's being seen or being expressed, or literally
mm,
coming into the middle of the room, but they were
mm,
always in the corners or on the outside.
mm,
And I felt that way a lot in my life,
mm,
and I could also see the benefit and the utility of going where I'm not comfortable
mm,
too, which is kind of the byline I would say on my biography as well. It's really that's the that's what I've really explored over the years, and
mm,
it's another kind of guiding principle of really having a look at the discomfort and aspects of myself that I don't accept so easily, which is a bit the granny on the bus too. So
mm.
the part of me that would murder
Yeah,
somebody,
we all have the granny killer
yeah,
inside.
the granny killer, yeah. I think it was probably more my parents, but and my school bullies and people like that. But yeah, the part of me that kind of does
Mm,
is capable of that, and how long I had denied that, and then we're coming
mm,
into contact with that was quite a radical experience as well. And
mm,
here's a few bits and pieces where is to be in a container where that's possible to
mm,
explore that, because the reason why I wasn't harsh to people or hard on people or cruel to people knowingly was because I was actually I was afraid of being attacked, but also I was afraid of becoming that
mm,
being who would take someone's life, and not only take somebody's life but enjoy it too.
mm, mm,
And I had a number of different experiences where I've explored that, and actually the power of that too. So yeah, it's chilling at times.
mm.
Mm.
Yeah, a place that often many people don't go to because it's too scary, too out there. Yeah, I'm wondering if you have any questions for me because we talked about having a
Mm.
an interactive chat. So just conscious of the time and wondering if you want to take us anywhere, and if not, that's fine.
Yeah, one thing that was curious to me, I'm not exactly sure why, but I wanted to ask you what plant medicine that you had worked with that you had felt had been the most supportive for you in your experiences, whatever you were
Mm.
seeking or whatever you were longing for.
The only plant medicine I've done is Cambo.
Ah,
Yeah,
ordeal medicine.
it was horrendous.
Are you a bit of a masochist?
I was at the time. I'm actually trying to step away from that masochist part of me. To be honest,
Mm,
I think it was a lot of how I've kind of, I guess, evolved in my life has been the part of me that runs forward without consulting with the parts of me that are still on the sofa, that are having a
mm,
nice time and wondering what the fuck we're doing. And I think that Canva experience was one of those. I was very much in this energy of awakening and soul initiation and growth and transformation. And I want to meet more, see more, do more, like meet the parts of me. And oh, I'm going through a breakup. I know I'll do Canva. And then I got told afterwards, actually, if you're in a really heightened emotional state, it can be really, really severe. And I actually feel like I'm incredibly sensitive to psychedelics anyway.
mm,
Um, I've actually had mushrooms, but all the times I've done psychedelics, it's been, or any kind of plant medicine, as I mentioned, it's been so emotional and so revealing and an ordeal of some sort, on varying different levels of the scale. And I would actually really love to have a more therapeutic experience because I'm not so much. I've never really been a reckless hedonist, apart from when I was at university, maybe. Um, but I
mm,
think there is a reckless part of me that has wanted to seek truth at the expense of the rest of me being ready. And I wouldn't actually change that because I am where I am because of it. But now I'm more discerning about what I need actually. Like I actually feel I'm in a place at the moment where I'm seeing the fruits of softness and slowness and integration and allowing time and deep presence and all the other things like is actually helping me really catch up with my edges and I think reach a greater level of potential and fulfillment. Because I do think that to continue how I was going, I was kind of possibly going to reach law of diminishing returns, just like grinding myself into the dirt. Mm.
what was your Cambo experience like? If you could summarize it, like I'm curious because I've seen lots of different experiences with it and had lots of different experiences with it too. So I'm wondering what the gift of it was, or perhaps the punishment. I'm not sure. Maybe
The,
they're
the
indivisible.
the gift was that I got the very strong message that I needed to leave the relationship that I was in at the time.
Mm,
I actually then didn't. I completely ignored it. But still, that was the clear message. And yeah, I think the beautiful, although it was really painful moment that I mentioned was it's quite a cosmic experience of kind of hard even to put into words, but just feeling like such a primal need to be with my mum. And that has come up, it used to kind of wind me because I lived in New Zealand for 6 years and I was never consciously that homesick, but every now and again I would be basically winded by this feeling of grief of missing my mum in particular. And it was so primal. I once ended a relationship with someone I was dating who I wasn't even that interested in. I don't think I definitely wasn't that devastated by it. But I remember crying so much driving away and just realizing I'm actually just crying because I want my mum here.
mm,
Um, so that was a big thread of that. But I don't really know why or how or whatever, but I feel like the Cambo pulled me so deep into the earth, deep into
mm.
purging, and also blasted me up somewhere very high at the same time. And I was just lying in the woods for hours afterwards. Everyone else got up and went about their day, and I just couldn't even walk or move. Or and later on that day, I was like, "This is like the worst hangover I've ever had in my life." So I'm not selling camp very well for anyone that's listening. I think I had a unique experience from what I've heard. Everyone else seems to love it that's done it.
And your experience mirrors most of my
Oh,
experiences
really?
too. For me, it was like I felt like a complete collapse, like of my
Mm,
body. And the guy had done like 7 points on me on my neck. He even did one on my toe because he was going through some sort of experiment with a Chinese meridian, whatever. So I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to go with it. Vaguely trusty as much as I could at the time. But I remember the early onset of that need thing was that there was a woman in the room who just came and very gently lifted my neck off of the mattress and just put a cushion underneath and stroked my hair. I remember that was a week-long retreat where we were doing all kinds of other things. And at the time, that was probably my highlight of the retreat. I
mm,
remember being really deeply moved as much as I could be at the time. But
mm,
then I did it again with my now wife a few years ago, and
mm,
she'd never done anything like that before, and I had. And she basically she got the marks that got the thing administered, and then she went through the process from beginning to end in about 5 minutes. And I remember for me, it took about an hour and 20 minutes from beginning to end. And it was just agony. And I was
mm,
fighting and resisting. And I was like, oh,
mm,
you know what? Like, I think there's something about my wife that she's pretty like open, like emotionally, because that's
mm,
how I experienced my struggle was that I wasn't open emotionally. I wasn't
mm,
actually very capable of surrendering to the experience or kind of yielding to the experience. And yeah, we were all struggling, and I sort of saw my wife kind of like almost like doing her nails towards the end. She was just I hate you. Yeah. But yeah, I guess I've been curious about like what kinds of things you might have done in the past too, because I know what we're both connected to Haydn. I think
mm,
you more recently in
mm,
the cycle of the second ray trainings.
mm,
I know that you're with Gaia as well,
mm,
Nico, who I've had yeah a journey with over the last couple of years as well. So
mm.
yeah, it's nice to be with you and
Yeah,
to feel you as well.
yeah, totally. Yeah, I feel like there's many avenues we could go down, but I'm just feeling like maybe we start to wind down, and I'm wondering if you want to share anything before we go.
Mm. No, I don't think so. I think I feel reasonably complete.
Hmm.
Mm.
Nice. Yeah, I think there's a beautiful conversation to be had about your psychedelic work, but maybe we save that for another time.
Yeah, yeah, I'm aware that like I can also kind of drift into anecdote quite a lot as well and stories. So it's like yeah, just hoping that there's something in there that might be useful.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much.
Okay.